Hello all, welcome to the AOCC's Diversity in Athletics program. My name is Manveer Sandhu, I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the current Vice President and incoming President of the Athletes of Color Coalition. The purpose of tonight's program is to look critically at each of our different identities and how they intersect with each other and may be presented differently in different situations. As we, the Bowdoin community, aim to be better allies, we must understand intersectionality and support whole individuals. We will be hearing from a number of AOCC members tonight. Please be respectful, put your phone away, and give all of your attention to the person talking. After the Facebook Live event is over, please join us for a discussion over Zoom. The Zoom link will be on the screen after everyone has spoken. If you choose to join our discussion, please be ready to participate and be uncomfortable. Thank you.
I remember my freshman year in 2017 being the height of athletes and activism in our generation. Just a year earlier, Colin Kaepernick famously took a knee during the national anthem, and LeBron had risen as a leader in the fight for equality. Even though the U.S. has a history of its athletes of color standing up for social justice, LeBron was told to shut up and dribble, and Kaepernick was barred from NFL competition. In an athletes of color meeting, people of color across teams at Bowdoin decided to symbolically demonstrate to protest racial discrimination in the U.S. As an example, we discussed how that year, the entire Wesleyan football team decided to stay in the locker room for every national anthem before a competition. They did this to shed light on the social movement going on across the country. It showed the team's unity, leadership, and cognizance of the issues that affected people of color in the nation. In our next home game, my teammates of color and I decided to protest by holding our fists above our heads during the national anthem. This was the same way that the now celebrated Tommy Smith and John Carlos did in the Summer Olympics of '68 during their award ceremony. They did this to protest racial discrimination faced by African Americans at home, and this was only months after MLK was murdered. We as athletes of color felt that we need to participate in the movement that brings attention to the plight of people that look like us. However, our demonstration didn't prompt any discussion on our team or around the community. It showed how our team couldn't stand together at a pivotal time where athletes were the nation's top activists. And it makes me think of how another team in our conference was able to come together to show support for an issue that was bigger than sports. At the end of the day, the message was clear. We did it because of police brutality and the experiences of inequality of Black and brown people. Since LeBron and Kaepernick are Black athletes on and off the field, they knew that they couldn't choose to stop caring about racism while they're in uniform. Both athletes recognized it was time to do what so many athletes of color did before them, which was use their platform to raise awareness to issues that cannot be ignored by people of color. Just like how these athletes carry their identities with them on and off the field, so do many team members at Bowdoin. In the same way that teammates should be there for each other on the field, we should be there to support one another's identities and struggles off the field. Because at the end of the day, being a teammate is about being there for one another.
Being a member of Bowdoin's community as a Catholic, Black, Afro-Caribbean, international student athlete affords me a wide range of experiences, with each intersectionality placing their own hurdles onto my track of self-discovery and elevation. I have received overwhelming support from day one from my coach, a woman of color who I consider a mentor, Coach LJ. And during my initial visit, I felt like I could call this place home. But I'm not sure that my heart resides here just yet. This year, my close friends, my coaches, and even my quick conversations with Debbie and Meredith at Thorne have created a sense of belonging. And I know for a fact that I could not have made it through this entire year without the love and support from the women and men on the track and field team. I may not have seen much, but this is a bit of what I've seen. Even among us athletes, there exists a social hierarchy by the sport that you play, and I also feel the socioeconomic disparity when it comes to team gear. While I feel supported as an athlete by my team's commitment to diversity and inclusion outside of the scheduled Zoom calls and conversations is lacking. I have to wonder if my white teammates and allies consider or are even aware of the daily threats, murder, and injustice to BIPOC communities. Because not much is being said to me in person or through social media. Show me, show us that our lives matter. My name is Kian Benjamin, a first year coming from the tropical temperatures of the Commonwealth of Dominica. We're not the Dominican Republic, but we're still from the Caribbean, all right? I've left 80-degree weather to come to this predominantly white institution to live and grow. This Bowdoin College, built in Penobscot, what has been renamed the Brunswick, Topsam, and Harpswell Main area, has afforded me many unique experiences, to say the least. And I look forward to my 3 years left on campus, hoping for a sense of normalcy in the near future.
My various identities have certainly come to not only define me as a person, but also to influence and shape my Bowdoin experience so far. This comes into play and it's shown, in the classroom, in my own team, and then in the social aspects of the Bowdoin experience, whether that's, meals in the dining halls, just walking around campus, how people look at you, going to the library, or, at parties on the weekends. This doesn't just involve race, obviously. It's something that involves gender, religion, sexuality, your socioeconomic background, your home life, etc. But just some ways that affect me personally in terms of, I think probably I'll speak on home life and socioeconomic background first. I think being somebody that doesn't come from your standard, like, two-parent household, and instead being raised in a single-parent household and not being of a higher, socioeconomic background, not going to one of the, prestigious prep schools, and instead, like, just going to a local public school and, having to struggle to make ends meet, whether that's, paying for sports or paying to get to go to Bowdoin. I think it's just this, like, kind of lack of inclusivity that you feel in your Bowdoin experience because of your difference. You're not the norm. People talking about, like, what they do with, like, their parents, and then family weekend, like, talking about, like, their mom and dad and stuff like that, and then asking about, like, what your parents do and stuff like that. And if you come from a lower socioeconomic class, like, kind of being looked down upon because your parents aren't doing some grand thing, or because you don't have the standard mother and father household, and just this, like, kind of aura of exclusivity, I think, is a toxic kind of part of the Bowdoin experience that you can feel in terms of that stuff. I think within even athletics, even more, if you do come from that lower socioeconomic background, I think that a lot of people just, like, don't consider how that ties into athletics, whether that's needing to find a way to buy the required apparel for your season, or having to pay for a spring break trip where there's official games that you have to be at for your team, but then you have to pay for the trip down to Florida or wherever else your team is going for spring break yourself, and you might not do a fundraiser because your coach doesn't think that it's going to be a problem, and for most of the people on your team it's not. But if you're from that lower socioeconomic background, like, you're just trying to pay tuition, and then on top of that, now you have to pay for a trip that could be hundreds of dollars, and that's not a big deal to other people, but for you it is, and for your family it means a lot more sacrifices. In terms of race, I'm definitely in a unique position in terms of being white passing. I have white privilege in terms of, compared to, like, other athletes of color and students of color who are not. And so I don't have to worry about getting, the cops stopping me if I'm just walking around Brunswick, or campus police, when I'm just walking around doing my own business. I don't have to worry about those people like stopping me. I don't have to worry about as much being fetishized in the hookup culture of Bowdoin. I don't have to worry as much about being excluded purely based on my skin color, or people just assuming that like I'm scary or I'm aggressive because I'm not the same as them. To a certain degree, I do, because I'm not 100% white, and there's definitely a certain aspect of exclusivity there too, where you don't fully fit into that mold, and so you might not be as welcomed in those circles. I think you also see it in terms of, as somebody that's white passing but is of color, like you'll hear things from people where they don't realize that there's somebody of color around, and they'll say stuff that's racist, that's degrading, that's dehumanizing, and they wouldn't say if there's somebody that wasn't there, that wasn't passing. And so you're in a unique position to call that out, but at the same time, once people realize that you are of color and like you're not just gonna like sit by and listen to it, without there being like either you saying something or getting back other people that like they said something about them, you do get excluded because of that. And I don't know if that's because they're just not used to being around people of color, or they just don't want that kind of accountability that forces them to change for the better, but definitely kind of feeds into that exclusivity and toxic culture that I think can shape the Bowdoin experience, especially if you don't fit into these main norms and main identities of a Bowdoin student. And I think those are definitely things that as a community we need to work on more moving forward.
I will be reading an anonymous story that was sent in. I remember coming to Bowdoin as a prospective student and admiring how close the teams were. It was nice seeing how they all resembled one big happy family, and each person seemed to enjoy being around one another. It reminded me of the special bond that I had with my high school team, and it was something I wanted to continue, even with completely different people. Once I started my first year as an actual Bowdoin student, I soon realized that my connection with my teammates was not what I hoped for. I felt rather alienated and unwelcome. I was always told that one advantage that first-year athletes got was the support from their team as they transitioned to college life. But I did not feel supported by my teammates. I felt alone, afraid, and disgusted with myself. I made attempts to reach out to my teammates, but it seemed as though my efforts weren't enough. I always asked myself that maybe it would be different if we had more upperclassmen students, or maybe we're just shy, since we're only all first years with little guidance. Yet, as I observed the interactions between the teammates with one another and then their interactions with me, I realized that maybe I wasn't overreacting. The different change in tone, body language, and looks I got was enough for me to feel as though I didn't belong. Additionally, the intersectionality of my identities made me feel worse about myself. Sure, from the entirety of the team, there were members that identified themselves as a woman, a person of color, Black, short, big, low income, walk-on, graduate of a public school, etc. But I happen to be all of them, and they are oftentimes identities that are unappealing to others or marginalized. I felt as though I had to hide myself, and I never felt comfortable being around my team. It was a feeling that was definitely different to me, as I went to a very diverse school and was a part of a diverse team, and everyone had these different identities that we accepted and could relate to as well. Therefore, there was no need to hide, as everyone was there for one another and was willing to express themselves. It was sad to know that I may not call this place a second home for me, when that was something I always wanted since my arrival at campus. Of course, not everyone on the team has ill intentions. I have met some people that are eager to do better and be supportive of all people, especially my coaches, and they have done a great job trying to be as inclusive as possible to everyone. But a lot of the negative energy that I receive from other teammates is what has made me want to leave the team altogether and stop playing the sport that I love so much. I hope that in the next 3 years, I will be able to express myself the way that I want to and not feel bad about how I look. I hope that there will be change in the team demographic as I continue my journey playing, and that my relationship with my teammates improve as well.
Hi, my name is Olivia Choi, and I'm currently a first year at Bowdoin. I'm on the field hockey team, and I use she, her pronouns. I am Korean American, and I would say that my identity at Bowdoin so far has led me to a great group of people in AOCC. I grew up in a predominantly white area, so I've never really experienced having a community of people of color. And coming to Bowdoin, I honestly didn't think I needed one. I was so used to being in a predominantly white lifestyle that I hadn't really thought about needing anything else. On my field hockey team in high school, I was one of two people of color on the team. It was definitely hard having to always be in such a white space where no one could really relate to a lot of things that I was experiencing just in my everyday life. And it was really hard not having that space, but I did fine in high school. So coming to college, I never really even thought that I needed a community like that. But joining AOCC and being in a space where I finally have those people has been a great experience for me. And I'm really enjoying having that community and those people where I can share my stories and share my experiences, and just if it's not concerning race, just being in a space where I feel comfortable with myself has been a really great opportunity.
I feel like many parts of my identity has influenced my Bowdoin experience and career. In terms of athletics, in terms of being a Black woman, coming from a predominantly white high school and into a Bowdoin atmosphere. And, you know, several parts of my identity have given me advantages and also some disadvantages and some complexities in my time at Bowdoin. I would say being an athlete and coming from a predominantly white high school has been an advantage in a sense, because I know how to maneuver through white spaces and being the only Black person in class. And so I'm challenged in those areas, obviously, because anytime you are the only Black person in class, there are different barriers or hurdles you have to overcome in order to assert yourself in class and feel like you can participate. But I also felt like I was prepared because of the private school that I came from in New Orleans. On the other hand, being an athlete and playing tennis has also given me an advantage on Bowdoin's campus, because at the same time, yes, I am Black, but also I'm an athlete, and athletes kind of are a majority of the campus, and so you have privileges there. On the flip side of that, though, being a Black woman and playing a country club sport, one where you are, as a woman, supposed to be quiet, supposed to be graceful, supposed to be very elegant, and that's something that a Black woman doesn't normally embody in a society that really thinks of them as an angry Black woman. And so I think there have been many challenges there for me on campus when it came to playing tennis, and with having this sort of demeanor of being a competitor and being feisty and being assertive and dominant on the court. That's something that's not really embodied or looked at as great when it's embodied by a woman. And so, especially in tennis, you often come off as too aggressive or aggravated or angry, and that's been something that I've had to wrestle with as being a Black woman and playing tennis and being on campus. On the other hand, that's my experience, and that's what I've endured at Bowdoin, and it might not be the same experience as another female athlete who's African American or POC at Bowdoin, but I think it's important to know that every experience for a person of color is different in athletics, depending on where they came from, their upbringing, and what they're used to and who they're surrounded by. I think a lot of times people group all of our experiences into one and think that if you hear one of our experiences or one aspect of our identities, that you think that it's sort of an umbrella that encompasses all POCs, and that's definitely not the case. I'm definitely speaking from personal experience and would say that my identities of being Black, being a woman, being an athlete, coming from a predominantly white high school and being in a predominantly white institution right now has given me multiple, I would say, up and downs of experiences. And I think overall I've learned a lot about myself, but a lot about Bowdoin as an institution and where it needs to grow in terms of the social scene and with its diversity in athletics and things like that, because that impacts students differently, and it definitely impacted me. And I felt that I definitely would say that my freshman year on campus, coming in as a freshman and entering a predominantly white institution and entering a predominantly white team, I thought that, you know, like it would be the same as high school, like I could handle it, it's fine, but it was definitely a different sort of feel and something I had to get used to and figure out how to navigate through. And I feel like in the end I figured it out, but it definitely took an emotional toll, a mental toll, and you know, that's what life brings you when you are a person of color. You definitely go through ups and downs, you definitely go through mental battles, physical battles, and things like that. And so I would say that my identities offer multiple effects on my life.
My name is Preston Anderson, and I am a junior on the sailing team. I identify as an African American. Over the past year, we as a Bowdoin community have engaged in conversations that focus on confronting systematic and institutional racism that have plagued our nation as a whole. These conversations are incredibly important as we continue to strive to make people of color on our teams feel accepted. As one of the very few people of color on my team and in the sport of sailing, I have experienced situations where I felt very uncomfortable. This past fall, an article was published by Bowdoin about the DEI work I have been doing within the collegiate sailing world. The article featured quotes from my coaches, a couple teammates, and myself. It later was shared on the Bowdoin Twitter account with the part of the caption reading, "Following a summer when the nation once again takes stock of entrenched racism, Preston Anderson is making positive changes where he can in his sport of sailing." However, the tweet featured a photo of another person of color on the team. At first, I was incredibly confused, and then I became extremely frustrated. I was mistaken for another person of color on my team. To make matters worse, even though they were immediately called out in the comments, it took emails to athletic admin, calls from alumni to the deans to resolve the issue, an entire 5 days later. Bowdoin needs to continue to be held accountable and to have critical conversations so that these issues never come up again. Diversity and representation is incredibly important within collegiate sports, and we need to continue to support athletes of color, but the support must be multifaceted and fluid, adapting to the needs of our students as they evolve.
I will be reading an anonymous story. One thing that I quickly realized after matriculating at Bowdoin is that you don't talk about your socioeconomic background. No one does. It seems as though from the moment you step on campus, there's some unspoken rule about it. Not saying this is something that needs to be brought up at brunch, and I obviously knew that I would encounter a lot of rich kids at a school like Bowdoin. However, it's always a jarring experience as a low-income student hearing stories about people summering on yachts in the Cape or traveling to Europe for luxurious getaways. While this story is by no means a method of guilting people into not having a great time, I've realized that not talking about socioeconomic differences makes life a little harder for student athletes. Not only do we need to purchase all of the necessary equipment to play our sport out of our own pocket, none of which is cheap, we also have to consider gear day. It can be quite frustrating to pour hours into a sport only to not be able to experience one of the perks of being an athlete on gear day. Now, gear isn't a mandatory purchase, but having it really brings a team together. Therefore, it sucks when none of the gear prices fit in your budget for that season. It's not fair or equitable. Gear is an important part of the athletic life, so why isn't it more accessible? It's good that next year the athletic department is making strides to make gear more available, but I also wonder why it took so long to get there. How many low-income student athletes had to sit back and pretend that they didn't want the new team jacket simply because they didn't have the funds for it and felt it was too taboo to ask for help?
My name is Cheng. I'm a member of the Bowdoin Chapter field team. I actually do not feel much alienated because of my race or identity judged in my team. For my class of 2023, all the male sprinter and jumper are persons of color, but the rest are not. Though this is something I can see, I feel quite supported by my teammates. I blocked with 2 POC for college house and was living together with 2 white distance runners last spring and summer. So I actually did not feel much difference just because of my appearance when hanging out with them. One of the reasons of this might be Coach LJ being the only POC head coach that is also my run coach. She's very, very supportive. However, outside my team, in the general athletic sphere at Bowdoin, I do feel I'm a bit different. Possibly I'm the only few Asian athletes. And some of my Asian athletes, some of my Asian friends have explicitly and implicitly said that I'm representing Asian in some degree, that I need to do well, especially there are not many Asian track and field athletes on the world stage, so that people may not correlate Asian being very good at track.
We hope these stories shed light into why it's important to support the holistic identity of people. While at times it may seem easy to identify someone as an athlete or person of color based on surface level interactions, in order to truly understand someone's experience, we must aim to get to know them better and acknowledge the identities beyond what we see on the surface. We are not just athletes of color, but the intersectionality between race and our other identities make each experience unique. For this reason, in order to be better allies and create a more inclusive space, we must all get to know people more personally and be aware of the intersections of identities that impact their experience. Join us on Zoom right after this for breakout discussions on what tangible steps you can take to be better allies and support the holistic identities of members of the Bowdoin community. Thank you.